Hi everyone, my name is Priya Serju and welcome to my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing something a little different. I'll be doing this cityscape using Fineliners. Now I have used the Copic multi-liners for the outlines of a snake that I did recently with the brush markers, but I have never worked on a full piece using Fineliners. So this will be the first one, and I've never done a cityscape before. I've neither drawn it or painted it. This will be my first one that I've done at this level of detail. So that's going to be that was quite a challenge for me. In fact, I was a bit reluctant at first to do it. I thought I'm not going to be able to. But then I just said, let me choose a reference photo and just go with it and see where it goes. And I was actually pleasantly surprised with the final results. It was very rewarding and I was very happy with the final piece as it came out. And I learned a lot along the way. So if you're having any doubts about trying out something new or trying out something a bit challenging, just go ahead and try it out. You'll be surprised by the results that you will actually achieve. And you'll also be surprised by how much you will learn during that piece or working on that, during the time that you work on that piece. So for this one, what I did is I got a reference photo and I used the photo editor just to grayscale the entire one to get rid of the color, because it's going to be an illustration. It's going to be black and white. So we only want to see the values. And obviously I need to see everything having it in a gray tone makes it easier. And then obviously I put a grid over it, and then on my paper, which is the Fabriano Bristol illustration paper, I put a grid on that, and I use the grid drawing method to get the image or to draw the image block by block onto my paper for my final piece. So obviously after that I used a pencil. This is a normal pencil, Staedtler B graphite pencil, just to get the image on. I'm not pressing too hard with the pencil. That's why I'm using a B lead, just because I don't want to get any harsh lines onto the paper. We are going to erase the pencil lines later once we've done the inking with the Fineliners. So I work section by section and I move around. You'll see I'm moving from the bridge to the buildings, from the buildings back to the bridge, and then to the buildings again. With the grid drawing method, the good thing about this is because you're working block by block, you won't easily miss out a certain area, or you can always go back and find your place. You're not going to miss out on where did I stop and then not be able to. So you can work over a piece for a couple of days. You don't have to finish it in one sitting. For this one, I did the sketch on one day and I did the inking and the final detail the next day. Now also another thing to remember with the cityscape and something with this much detail and so many buildings, you need to ensure that it is as accurate as you can get it. The more accurate the better. It should be actually 100% accurate. The building should be straight. Nothing should be skew. Walls are not skew. The roof should be right. The angles of the roof should be right. The angles of the walls should be right. The bridge with perspective needs to be correct. You need to ensure that things in the foreground are in the foreground and nothing from the background is covering over those items that are in the foreground, like that lamppost. It's in the foreground. It needs to be up in front of the buildings in the background. So perspective is very important with any cityscape that you're doing, and you need to pay close attention to that. And also you need to pay attention to the angles that the roofs are, the walls are, because certain buildings obviously will have certain designs to them. You need to pay close attention to that as well. Now for the initial sketch, I'm not doing too much of detail in there. I do have detail, but not too much. I've just got where everything goes, where every window goes, where every roof goes, the buildings, the doors, the rails for the bridge, all of that is in there, but I do not have any detail. We're going to come to that later, at a later stage, into the details. Now I've done the final sketch and I was deciding between two different sets that I purchased of Fineliners. One was the Sakura Pigma Micron water-based pigment markers for illustration, and the other one was the Mont Graphic Fineliners. So I decided to go with the Mont Graphic Fineliners because it came with a brush tip, which I needed for some of the deep shadows. So I decided to go with that one. So as you can see now, I started working with the Fineliner and I'm just outlining everything. So at this stage, your sketch is done. You made sure everything was correct and the image of your sketch was 100% accurate to the actual reference photo. You made sure you didn't leave out anything. And at this stage is where you can correct mistakes. If you find something that you did with the pencil that was not correct, you can correct it now before working with the Fineliner. Doing it in pencil and then going over the Fineliner, or with the Fineliner itself if you're confident enough to correct it using the Fineliner. And at this stage also, you may find certain areas which you forgot to put on with the pencil. Maybe there was a line missing somewhere, or a wall missing somewhere, or part of a roof missing somewhere. You can add that now with the fine liner when you're going through the outlining process. At this stage, again, we are not doing any detailing, no shadows, nothing. We're not paying attention to the details. We're only covering everything that we've drawn in with the pencil. We just want to cover all the pencil work, because then we're going to come to the stage before detailing where we're going to erase the pencil lines from the drawing. So with this stage, I am still working from side by side and section to section, but it is advisable to pay close attention to your reference photo as well while you're doing the stage. Although you've got the drawing, just make sure you keep referring back to it to make sure that you are still following it, because if you make a mistake at this stage, or if you draw over something that's not supposed to have a line on it, you're not going to be able to correct it easily. So at this stage, be very careful when you're lining. Do not draw if there was incorrect pencil line, for example, where it shouldn't be, like something in the foreground, there's a line going across it from the background. If you do copy that line over onto the foreground item, it's not going to look, the perspective is going to be spoiled and you won't be able to correct it. So at this stage, make sure that you're very careful, take your time, do not rush through it, work section by section, and just make sure all the pencil work is covered. So there we have it. That is my outlined sketch. Now we are going to make sure that it is completely dry. Once it's dry and you're sure that it's dry, make sure you use a clean eraser. Clean off your eraser on a scrap piece of paper and then erase all the pencil lines from the drawing. Remember also, your eraser must be clean, because you don't want any graphite lines or graphite pencil getting onto your drawing, and also you don't want any smudges of if any of the ink is wet from the fine liners. Okay, so now I'm going in and starting on the detail. Now at this stage, I'm using a variety of pencils. When I did the first initial outlining with the fine liner, I used mostly a 0.5, but now I'm using a 0.7, 0.5, the brush tip, as well as for very fine details, I'm using a 0.1, 0.03, and 0.05 as well. So depending on how fine detail you need and how small an area you're working on, you will need to decide on the size of the tip you need. Smaller details, smaller subjects or objects, you need to use finer nibs, and for shadow areas or larger areas that you need to cover, you can use the thicker nibs. So as you can see, I'm working all the windows. Now is when you need to pay close attention to your reference photo and look at where the shadows are falling, where the areas need to be left white of the paper, where the white of the paper needs to show through for highlights, and the lighter areas, and you need to pay close attention to the textures, the walls, the shadow areas. Some walls will be in the shadow, some will be in the light. You can see the area from the left, which I've done the detailing, to the building on the building on the left, the building on the right. There's a big difference once the detail is added. So you need to add those details, the windows pane, the window panes, the roofs, as well as the textures of the walls, the different textures. Remember, all the buildings are not going to have the same textures, they're not going to have the same roofs. So you need to pay close attention to that and obviously adjust accordingly depending on your reference photo. Remember, in order for your work to look realistic and to look three-dimensional, you need to have your shadows in the correct places, and you need to have the correct darkness of the shadows. And with the fine liner, you use cross hatching for that, so you can have some solid color in there, and you can also have cross hatching depending on what you need to put the shadows or where you need to put the shadows. And at this stage, I would advise you to work one side to the other side. If you move from one section to the other, there is a chance you may miss a wall or you may miss a roof, especially on something with this much of detail and this many buildings in it. You may miss out on a wall, or you may miss out something that maybe a window. So try to get all of it done in a sequence. So work from one side to the other, because you need to make sure that you do not leave anything out. Although if you do leave anything out, you can come back later on and compare it to your reference photo and say, okay, I've left this out, and then go back and correct it. But it's better to avoid that and make sure you've done it correctly in the first place. That's why I said initially your drawing must be accurate, perspective must be 100%, so that the rest of your fine liner work and your detail work will obviously make it easier so you won't have to worry about having any mistakes in your final piece. Remember as well, the final details of the piece is going to obviously have, or the final details, you're going to have the buildings in the distance. Like, for example, the buildings further than these buildings. Those buildings are going to obviously not have as much detail as the foreground because those buildings are far in the distance. So you're just going to give an indication that there is a building there, but you're not going to have too much details in that particular building. You're just going to show that there's a building there, but not going to be put too much of emphasis on that. You're rather going to focus on the buildings that are in focus and the ones that you can see the detail on. So you can see on this building, I'm working window by window. I'm working on the window panes. I worked on the roof. I've done the shadows on the roof. I've done the shadows on the windows. And some of the design as well of the building. Remember, pay close attention. The buildings have got lots of designs. Every building is different. So pay close attention to that. Even using the different textures to represent the buildings. Change it about. Don't keep it too uniform because all the buildings are not going to be the same. You can see there, I'm just going through the background buildings. So had I not noticed that I haven't done that, I could have left that out at the end piece, or maybe would have noticed it when I was finally reviewing my final piece. But it's better to make sure that you have worked on every piece as you go along. So I'm just working on the entrance and the door there. And now I'm moving on to the bridge. Sorry about this. Some part of it is not in the view of the camera. I get so involved with the drawing, I sometimes forget that what needs to be. I need to move the paper to be in the view of the camera. But I'm soon going to start working on the bridge this side. And I think I'm going to move the paper as well. So you'll be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, there we go. Now I'm working on the bridge and the paving and the railings. Now all of that, as I said, you will differ the size of the nib depending on the details and how fine lines you need and how thick shadows you need. All of that will determine which pen you can use or which nib you're going to use. Remember, it's very important that the shadow areas are correct and the highlighted areas are correct in order for you to be able to see the scene. You don't want everything to muddle up into one just image of black and white and you can't see the different buildings and you can't see the bridge. You need to make sure everything is correct. And things in the foreground must be, make sure that there's no lines coming from the background items like the background buildings over the foreground. For example, the lamppost. Make sure those buildings and the background and the lamppost comes forward and then you move from the back forward. But obviously in this case you can't redraw the forward items, so make sure that your items that are in front are correctly done at first so that you're not going to make the mistake to draw lines over. So you can see I'm using cross hatching just to get some of the shadows. As the bridge goes further down, it gets darker, less detail, and just getting the shadows in. I also use the brush pen to get some of that darker shadows in. So I guess that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it's been helpful to you and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, don't forget to like and share and don't forget to subscribe. Till the next one, bye.